The whirring sound grew louder, a tiny buzzing fly in the vast blue sky. Then, a shadow, swift and silent, swooped down from above. My heart leaped into my throat as Patriot, my magnificent golden eagle, unfolded his massive wings and plunged towards the drone. It was a sleek, black predator of the air, spying on my peaceful farm, sent no doubt by that meddling HOA president, Brenda. One moment, the drone was hovering, its camera lens glinting in the sun, and the next, Patriot's talons, sharp as razors, gripped its metallic body. A sickening crunch echoed across the fields, and then, bits of plastic and wires rained down onto my prize-winning pumpkins. Patriot soared upwards, the drone's broken remains dangling from his powerful grasp, before he dropped it unceremoniously into the muddy pigpen. A triumphant screech ripped through the air. What in the world was Brenda going to do now? Life on our little farm had always been about quiet mornings and honest hard work. My name is Alex, and for generations, my family has lived on this land, long before the Willow Creek Estates decided to build their fancy houses right up against our property line. Our farm wasn't just a business, it was our home, our history, our heart. We had cows that mooed a greeting every morning, chickens that clucked contentedly, and fields of vibrant crops that stretched out under the wide-open sky. The air here smelled of fresh earth and growing things, a sweet perfume compared to the sterile, manicured lawns of the HOA. When the first houses started going up, all neat rows and identical mailboxes, we didn't think much of it. Folks moving to the country, seeking a bit of peace and quiet. We waved to our new neighbors, offered them fresh eggs, and even helped a few find their way around the winding country roads. Most were friendly enough, curious about farm life. They loved seeing the baby calves wobble on new legs and hearing the roosters crow at dawn. We thought we'd all live in harmony, two different worlds coexisting side by side. Then came Brenda. She moved into the largest house at the very edge of the development, a sprawling mansion with more windows than a skyscraper. From the moment she arrived, she seemed to see our farm not as a vital part of the community, but as an eyesore. Her perfectly coiffed hair and perpetually pursed lips became a familiar sight, often accompanied by a clipboard. She was always measuring things, taking notes, and muttering about property values and community aesthetics. One crisp autumn morning, a letter arrived. It was from the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, or HOA, as Brenda proudly called it. It said our barn, which had stood for over 100 years, was non-compliant with their architectural guidelines. Non-compliant? I scoffed, showing the letter to my Grandpa Joe. He just chuckled, a deep rumble from his chest. That barn was here before their grandpappies were even born, Alex, he said, shaking his head. More letters followed. Our cows' mooing was excessive noise. The smell of the pigs was a nuisance. Our tractor, which we'd used for decades, was unsightly when parked near the fence. Each complaint was more ridiculous than the last, and each one seemed to carry Brenda's distinct scent of disapproval. It wasn't just about rules, it felt personal. She wanted to erase the farm, to make it fit into her neat, predictable world. We tried to be understanding. We put up a new, albeit decorative, fence to block the view of the tractor from her house. We made sure the animal pens were cleaned even more frequently. We even installed a special sound barrier near the barn, though the cows seemed to find it more amusing than effective. We were trying to show kindness, hoping that our efforts would soften her, make her see us as neighbors, not problems. But Brenda saw every compromise as a victory, every attempt at peace as a sign of weakness. The tension grew, a silent battle waged over property lines and differing ways of life. Our quiet existence began to feel like a siege. One afternoon, my youngest sister, Lily, who loved to collect wildflowers from the edge of our fields, came running back to the house, her face tear-streaked. Brenda had yelled at her, telling her she was trespassing, even though Lily was clearly on our side of the property line. That's when I knew we had a real problem. Brenda wasn't just bothering us, she was actively trying to make our lives miserable. Then came the new rules. The HOA, under Brenda's relentless leadership, began to pass increasingly restrictive regulations. No farm animals visible from the street. No excessive farm equipment. No unapproved structures. It felt like they were trying to legislate our farm out of existence, one ridiculous rule at a time. The final straw came with the visual buffer mandate, which basically meant we had to plant a dense, tall hedge along the entire length of our property line that bordered the HOA, at our own expense, to hide the farm. It was clear Brenda wanted to pretend we weren't even there. We had a choice. We could pack up and leave, sell the farm that had been in our family for generations, and let Brenda win. Or we could stand our ground. We chose to fight. We consulted lawyers, researched zoning laws, and gathered support from the few friendly neighbors in the HOA who actually appreciated our farm. It was a long, draining battle, filled with endless meetings and paperwork. Brenda, however, seemed to thrive on the conflict, her eyes gleaming with a determined, almost zealous light. One day, after a particularly heated HOA meeting where Brenda had publicly accused us of blighting the neighborhood, I walked out feeling defeated. As I crossed our fields, I saw Patriot circling high above, his golden feathers catching the afternoon sun. He was a majestic sight, a wild spirit of the land, soaring free and unburdened. A thought sparked in my mind. Patriot wasn't just a symbol of freedom, he was a watchful protector, an ancient guardian of these lands. The next morning, I was outside, fixing a broken fence post, when I heard it again, that familiar, irritating buzz. It was a drone, smaller than the one Patriot had taken down, but unmistakable. It hovered over our vegetable patch, its camera pointed directly at me. I squinted, trying to see who was operating it, but it was too far away. This wasn't the first time we'd seen a drone, but usually they just zipped by. This one was clearly observing. My heart pounded with a mix of anger and unease. Was Brenda really resorting to spying on us? I watched it for a long moment, my jaw clenched, before it slowly drifted away, disappearing over the treetops in the direction of the HOA development. A cold dread settled in my stomach. What were they planning now? The drone incident left a bitter taste in my mouth, a stark reminder that Brenda's watchful eyes were always on us, even when we couldn't see them. It wasn't just about rules anymore. It felt like an invasion of our privacy, a constant reminder that our way of life was under scrutiny. Grandpa Joe, usually so calm, was visibly upset. "Spying on your own neighbors," he mumbled, shaking his head. "What has this world come to?" Lily, bless her heart, tried to draw a picture of a superhero eagle swooping down to save us, but even her cheerful crayons couldn't erase the feeling of being watched. We decided to fight back, but not with anger or spite. We would fight with kindness, with empathy, and with the law. We knew Brenda thrived on conflict, so our strategy was to be as transparent and reasonable as possible, highlighting her unreasonable demands. Our lawyer, a kind woman named Sarah, advised us to document everything. Every letter, every complaint, every interaction. We kept a meticulous log, noting dates, times, and what was said. It felt like we were building a case, not just against Brenda, but for our very existence on this land. One sunny afternoon, as I was repairing a leaky pipe in the barn, a brand new, sleek black car pulled up our driveway. Out stepped Brenda, dressed in a crisp white pantsuit, a clipboard clutched in her hand. She walked with an air of absolute authority, as if she owned the very ground she was treading on. My stomach tightened. This was it, I thought. Another confrontation. "Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice sharp and formal, "I'm here to address some pressing issues." She didn't wait for me to invite her in, but instead gestured sweepingly towards our fields. "Your corn, for instance. It's far too tall. It obstructs the view for residents in Willow Creek Estates. And your chickens. We've received complaints about their odor. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. Brenda, I said, trying to keep my voice even, this is a farm. Corn grows tall, and chickens, well, they smell like chickens. We are following all local ordinances and agricultural laws. She sniffed, as if detecting a foul odor that wasn't there. The HOA has certain standards, Mr. Thompson. Standards that you are clearly failing to uphold. This community prides itself on its pristine appearance. Your farm, it detracts from that. It was then that Lily, oblivious to the tension, ran out of the house, a handful of freshly picked blueberries staining her small fingers. She stopped short when she saw Brenda, her innocent eyes wide with curiosity. Brenda's gaze hardened. "And your children," she said, her voice dropping to a low, disapproving tone, "they are often seen playing near the property line. It's a safety concern." That was a step too far. My blood began to boil. "My sister is on our property, Brenda," I stated, my voice firm. "She has every right to be there. This is our home." Brenda merely offered a tight, humorless smile. "We shall see about that, Mr. Thompson. The HOA is prepared to take further action if these issues are not resolved." With that, she turned on her heel, her perfectly coiffed head held high, and marched back to her car. As she drove away, kicking up dust on our gravel driveway, I watched her go, a knot of frustration tightening in my chest. It was clear she wasn't going to stop. The days that followed were a blur of minor incidents. We found no trespassing signs mysteriously moved onto our land. A drone buzzed over our fields almost daily, a persistent annoyance. One morning, we woke up to find a perfectly manicured rose bush, planted clearly on our side of the property line, had been violently uprooted. It was a small act, but it spoke volumes about the escalating animosity. The town council meeting was our last hope. We had gathered every piece of documentation, every photograph, every witness statement. The meeting room was packed, a mix of curious onlookers, concerned farmers from neighboring areas, and of course, a strong contingent from the HOA, led by Brenda, who sat at the front, her face set in a mask of rigid determination. When it was our turn to speak, Grandpa Joe, despite his age, stood tall. He spoke about the history of the farm, about our family's commitment to the land, and about the vital role small farms play in the community. He spoke not of anger, but of understanding, asking for empathy and respect for different ways of life. I followed, presenting our carefully compiled evidence of harassment and unreasonable demands. We even had a few HOA residents bravely speak up in our favor, sharing how they enjoyed the farm and saw no issue with our operations. Brenda's presentation was slick and polished. She spoke of community standards, property value protection, and the right to a peaceful, aesthetically pleasing environment. She presented photographs of what she called unsightly farm equipment and unruly vegetation. Her voice was calm and persuasive, designed to appeal to those who valued order and uniformity above all else. She even brought up the drone incident, twisting it to sound as if we were somehow at fault for provoking an HOA asset. The council listened patiently, nodding at both sides. The air was thick with tension, a palpable hum of opposing forces. When the council members began their deliberations, it felt like hours passed, even though it was only minutes. Finally, the chairperson cleared her throat. After careful consideration of all the evidence and testimony, she began, "The council has reached a decision regarding the dispute between the Willow Creek HOA and the Thompson farm." My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. Our future hinged on their next words. Brenda sat ramrod straight, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. I held my breath, bracing myself for the worst. "The council finds," the chairperson continued, her voice clear, "that the Thompson farm is operating within all existing agricultural and zoning regulations. Furthermore, the council finds that many of the HOA's recent demands are unreasonable and infringe upon the established rights of a working farm. Therefore, the majority of the HOA's recent directives regarding the farm are hereby overturned. A collective gasp went through the room. Brenda's triumphant smirk vanished, replaced by a look of utter shock. A quiet cheer erupted from our supporters. We had won. The relief that washed over me was immense, like a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Grandpa Joe squeezed my arm, a rare smile gracing his lips. But Brenda's face, usually so composed, now contorted into something ugly. Her eyes, usually so cold, burned with a furious, unbridled rage. She stood up abruptly, knocking her chair over, and pointed a trembling finger at me. "This isn't over, Mr. Thompson," she shrieked, her voice echoing through the stunned silence of the room. "You may have won this battle, but you haven't won the war. You will regret this." With that, she stormed out of the meeting, leaving a trail of stunned silence and a chilling sense of what was yet to come. Her threat hung in the air like a storm cloud, promising far worse than just letters and complaints. Brenda's furious exit from the town hall meeting echoed in my mind for days. Her threat, "You haven't won the war. You will regret this," felt less like an empty boast and more like a dark promise. Grandpa Joe, usually so stoic, seemed to carry a new worry in his eyes. Even Lily, who had been so excited about our victory, now looked over her shoulder sometimes when she played outside. We had won a battle, true, but the air felt heavy, like before a big storm. We tried to go back to normal, to the comforting rhythm of farm life. The cows still needed milking, the chickens still needed feeding, and the field still needed tending. We spent our days working, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling of unease. Patriot, my magnificent eagle, continued to patrol the skies above our farm, his sharp eyes missing nothing. He was more than just a pet. He was a companion, a guardian, a symbol of the wild spirit that Brenda seemed so determined to tame. Then the incidents started. Small at first, almost unnoticeable. A garden hose found mysteriously cut. A bag of chicken feed torn open, scattering grain across the yard. We dismissed them as accidents, perhaps even animals getting into things. But then, the acts became bolder, more deliberate. One morning, we found the lock on our barn door jammed with super glue. It took us hours to get it open, delaying our morning chores significantly. The next day, someone had driven through our fence in the night, leaving a gaping hole that our cows could have easily escaped through. Luckily, we discovered it early, but it was a chilling reminder of how vulnerable we were. These weren't random acts, they felt targeted, designed to disrupt, to cause trouble. Brenda's words rang in my ears. Was this her war? We installed new security cameras, motion-activated lights, and reinforced our fences. It felt like we were turning our peaceful farm into a fortress, and it broke my heart to do it. The joy of simple living was slowly being replaced by a constant state of vigilance. One sweltering afternoon, as I was working in the farthest corner of our cornfield, a deafening roar ripped through the air. It wasn't the sound of a tractor or a low-flying plane. This was different, louder, more aggressive. I looked up to see a massive, industrial-grade drone, much larger than any we'd seen before. It hovered directly over our fields, its multiple propellers churning the air, kicking up dust and debris. This wasn't for spying, this was meant to intimidate. It looked like something out of a science fiction movie, sleek and menacing, painted a dull, intimidating gray. It had a strange, boxy attachment underneath, unlike any camera I'd ever seen. As I watched, horrified, the drone suddenly dipped, and then, a fine mist began to spray from its underside. It drifted down, covering the corn stalks, the pumpkin vines, everything in its path. My blood ran cold. Was it fertilizer? Pesticide? Something worse? I raced through the rows of corn, shouting for Grandpa Joe and Lily to get inside. The smell hit me then, a sharp, chemical odor that made my eyes water and my throat burn. It wasn't anything I recognized from farming. It was acrid, artificial, and terrifying. The drone continued its sweep, systematically dousing our crops. It flew lower and lower, almost touching the tops of the corn, ensuring maximum coverage. My mind raced, trying to figure out what it was doing, what chemicals it was spraying. Panic began to set in. Our entire livelihood, our food, our very land, was being attacked right before my eyes. Just then, from above, a familiar shadow fell over the drone. Patriot. He had been circling high above, a silent sentinel. Now, he descended in a breathtaking dive, a golden streak against the harsh blue sky. The drone, sensing the threat, tried to ascend rapidly, its powerful rotors whining in protest. But Patriot was faster. He hit the drone with a sickening thud, talons extended, ripping into its expensive machinery. Wires sparked, propellers shattered, and the drone spun wildly out of control, tumbling end over end. Patriot, unfazed, soared upwards, letting the broken pieces rain down onto our sprayed fields. He landed on a nearby oak tree, preening his feathers as if he'd just dealt with a pesky insect. I ran to where the largest piece of the drone had fallen, a mangled mess of plastic and circuits. The boxy attachment was cracked open, revealing a small, clear container with a residue of the strange liquid. My heart pounded with a mix of fear and rage. This was no accident. This was a direct, malicious attack. Someone had deliberately tried to poison our crops. Just then, I heard a car screech to a halt on the road bordering our farm. I looked up to see Brenda, standing by her black car, staring at the ruined drone and the disturbed fields. Her face was a mixture of shock and something else, a fleeting flash of triumph that she quickly tried to hide. Her eyes met mine, and in that moment, all pretense was gone. The veiled threats, the petty acts of vandalism, the constant surveillance, they all converged into one terrifying realization. This was her doing. She had escalated her war to an unimaginable level. She had tried to destroy our farm, our very means of survival, and she had used that monstrous drone to do it. Brenda quickly composed herself, her face returning to its usual stern expression. She took out her phone, snapped a quick picture of the downed drone, and then, without a word, she got back into her car and sped away. Her hasty retreat only solidified my suspicions. This wasn't just about an HOA anymore, this was about a desperate individual trying to break us. What she had sprayed, and what we would do about it, remained a terrifying unknown. Brenda's swift departure left a chilling silence in its wake, a silence broken only by the buzzing of confused bees and the frantic clucking of our chickens. My heart was still pounding from the sight of Patriot bringing down that monstrous drone, but the immediate relief was quickly replaced by a cold dread. What exactly had that drone been spraying? And what would it do to our crops, our animals, our very land? Grandpa Joe, his face grim, rushed out to meet me, his eyes wide with alarm as he took in the strange residue on the corn leaves and the mangled drone pieces. Lily, clinging to his leg, looked up at us with frightened eyes. "What's wrong, Alex? Is our corn sick?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The innocence in her question was a sharp, painful contrast to the grim reality we faced. This wasn't just about sick corn, this was an attack on our family, our livelihood, our future. We knew we couldn't wait. Time was critical. We carefully collected samples of the liquid from the drone's shattered container and from the leaves of the affected crops. The smell was still faint but lingered, a synthetic, slightly bitter aroma that made my stomach churn. Our neighbor, Dave, who ran a small veterinary clinic a few towns over and was a passionate advocate for sustainable farming, was the first person I called. He quickly agreed to come over, his voice filled with concern. When Dave arrived, he donned a pair of gloves and carefully examined the samples. His brow furrowed as he sniffed the residue. "This isn't anything I recognize as standard agricultural spray, Alex," he said, his voice serious. "It's got a peculiar chemical scent. We need to get this analyzed immediately. And I mean immediately. We can't risk this getting into the water table or affecting your livestock." He suggested a specialized lab known for environmental testing, located a few hours away. We packed the samples with extreme care, sealing them in airtight containers. Grandpa Joe, despite his age, insisted on coming with me. His wisdom, he said, would be invaluable, and I knew he simply wanted to be there, to face this challenge head-on with his family. The drive was tense, filled with unspoken fears. Every bump in the road felt like a jolt to our already frayed nerves. The lab was a stark, sterile place, filled with humming machinery and scientists in white coats. We explained our situation, omitting Brenda's name for now, focusing solely on the drone and the mysterious spray. The lead scientist, a woman with kind but piercing eyes, listened intently, her expression growing graver with each detail. She promised to expedite the testing, understanding the urgency of our situation. "We'll call you as soon as we have any preliminary results," she assured us. The waiting was agonizing. Every phone call made my heart leap. Every passing hour felt like an eternity. We tried to keep things as normal as possible for Lily, but the shadow of uncertainty hung heavy over our farm. We temporarily moved the animals to the unaffected pastures and began irrigating the sprayed fields with extra water, hoping to dilute whatever chemical had been used. It felt like a desperate gamble, but we had to do something. Days later, the phone finally rang. It was the lab. The scientist's voice was calm, but the news she delivered was anything but. The spray contained a highly concentrated, fast-acting herbicide, designed to kill vegetation quickly and completely. But that wasn't the worst of it. It also contained trace amounts of a powerful insect repellent, strong enough to deter not just pests, but beneficial insects like bees and butterflies. And finally, the most alarming discovery. A substance designed to sterilize soil, rendering it infertile for a prolonged period. "This wasn't just meant to kill your crops, Alex," the scientist explained, her voice grave. "This was designed to destroy the soil itself, to make it impossible to grow anything for years, possibly decades. And the insect repellent would have devastated the local ecosystem, affecting pollination for miles around. Whoever did this meant to cause maximum, long-term damage." A cold wave of shock washed over me, followed by a surge of pure, unadulterated fury. It wasn't just about money or inconvenience for Brenda. She had tried to wipe us off the map, to render our ancestral land barren and lifeless. This wasn't just an HOA dispute anymore, this was an act of environmental terrorism, an attempt to obliterate everything we held dear. Back at the farm, the realization settled in, heavy and suffocating. Grandpa Joe slumped onto a hay bale, his face etched with despair. "My father, and his father before him, worked this land," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "To think someone would try to poison it." Lily, sensing the shift in our moods, quietly hugged her stuffed cow, her usual boisterous energy replaced by a solemn stillness. But then, a flicker of something ignited within me. Despair quickly gave way to a fierce resolve. We would not let Brenda win. We would not let her destroy what generations had built. This land was our legacy, our connection to the past, and our hope for the future. The immediate problem was mitigating the damage. Dave, along with a few other sympathetic farmers, quickly mobilized. They brought over specialized equipment to help us intensely irrigate the fields, hoping to wash away as much of the chemical as possible. We worked tirelessly, day and night, pumping water, tilling the soil, and adding organic matter, trying to counteract the poison that had seeped into our earth. It was a race against time, a desperate attempt to save our fields before the chemicals fully took hold. As we worked, covered in mud and sweat, a familiar buzzing sound pierced the air. I looked up. There it was again, another drone, smaller this time, but unmistakably one of Brenda's. It hovered high above, a tiny speck against the setting sun, clearly observing our frantic efforts. It was a silent, mocking reminder that Brenda was still watching, still gloating, still waiting for us to crumble. But this time, I didn't feel fear. I felt a renewed surge of defiance. Let her watch. Let her think she had won. She had underestimated our resilience, our connection to this land, and our unbreakable spirit. The drone continued to hover, a silent, unblinking eye in the sky, as we continued our desperate fight to save our farm. That persistent drone, a tiny mechanical eye in the sky, was a constant, irritating reminder that Brenda was still out there, lurking and observing, even as we fought tooth and nail to save our farm. Her silent surveillance only fueled my determination. We worked tirelessly, a blur of motion and grim resolve. The earth, usually so giving, now felt fragile, wounded by the deliberate malice of that chemical spray. Grandpa Joe, despite his exhaustion, moved with a quiet dignity, his hands, gnarled from a lifetime of labor, expertly guiding the tiller. Lily, though too young to fully understand the gravity of the situation, instinctively helped where she could, watering the garden with a small pail and shooing away curious chickens. Days blurred into a grueling rhythm of work, worry, and a desperate hope. We poured every ounce of our energy, every penny of our savings, into revitalizing the soil. Dave, true to his word, became an invaluable ally, not just offering advice but bringing friends from neighboring farms to help. They arrived with their own equipment, their faces etched with shared concern, their hands calloused and ready. It was a heartwarming display of community, a stark contrast to Brenda's cold isolation. We spread tons of organic compost, a rich, dark earth that smelled of life and renewal. We planted cover crops, special plants that help restore nutrients and structure to damaged soil. We even tried an old family remedy, a special blend of natural minerals and beneficial microbes, passed down through generations. It was a long shot, but we were desperate. As the weeks passed, a subtle change began. The sickly yellow hue of the cornstalks began to fade, replaced by a tentative green. The pumpkin vines, once shriveled and brittle, started to sprout new, vibrant leaves. It was slow, agonizingly slow, but it was progress. Our efforts were beginning to pay off. The land, resilient and ancient, was fighting back, just like us. Brenda's drone, however, continued its daily patrols. Sometimes, it would hover just beyond our property line, a silent challenge. Other times, it would dart across our fields, as if performing a quick inspection. It felt like she was waiting for us to fail, watching for any sign of weakness. Each buzz of its rotors was a sting, a reminder of the poison she had unleashed upon our land. One crisp morning, as the sun was just beginning to paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I was out checking on the newly sprouted seedlings. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of dew and damp earth. A sense of calm, rare in recent weeks, settled over me. Then, a familiar whirring sound shattered the peace. It was Brenda's drone, flying lower than usual, sweeping across the furthest corner of our property, right where our ancient well stood. My heart jumped. The well was vital to our farm, providing fresh water for our home and animals. It was also an old, open well, covered only by a simple wooden lid. Why was she focusing on it? A cold fear gripped me. Had she found another way to attack us? As the drone hovered directly over the well, it descended even further. My eyes narrowed. It wasn't just hovering, it was actively lowering itself, almost touching the well lid. I started to run, a sudden, inexplicable panic seizing me. What was she doing? Was she trying to contaminate our water supply? The thought was chilling, a new low even for Brenda. Just as the drone was about to make contact with the well lid, a flash of gold streaked across the sky. Patriot. He had been perched silently on a distant oak tree, a watchful guardian, as always. With a powerful beat of his wings, he launched himself into a dive, a magnificent predator of the air. The drone, startled by the sudden attack, tried to dart away, its rotors whining loudly. But Patriot was too fast, too determined. His powerful talons lashed out, tearing into the drone's body with astonishing force. A shower of sparks erupted, followed by the sickening crunch of breaking plastic and twisting metal. The drone spun wildly, out of control, its lights flickering madly before going dark. It tumbled from the sky, a broken, lifeless thing, landing with a splash directly into the murky depths of our ancient well. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the triumphant cry of Patriot as he circled once, majestically, before landing on the well's edge, his keen eyes surveying his victory. I stood there, breathless, staring at the ripple in the water, the last bubbles rising from where the drone had disappeared. It was gone, sunk to the bottom of the well. But the relief was short-lived. A new fear, cold and sharp, immediately pierced through me. What if the drone had been carrying something? What if it had released chemicals, poison, into our water supply? The well was deep, and retrieving the drone, let alone assessing the damage, would be a monumental task. The thought that our clean, pure water, the very lifeblood of our farm, might now be tainted by Brenda's malice, was almost unbearable. My gaze drifted towards the Willow Creek Estates, a silent question forming in my mind: what would Brenda do now that her prize drone, her silent spy, was at the bottom of our well? The splash of the drone in the well echoed through the otherwise still morning, a grim punctuation mark to Brenda's relentless campaign. My heart sank, not in defeat, but in a fresh surge of dread. What horrors had she sent plunging into our clean water source? The thought of our family, our animals, consuming contaminated water sent a shiver down my spine. Patriot, perched regally on the well's stone edge, seemed to share my concern, his sharp eyes fixed on the disturbed water. Grandpa Joe arrived, his eyes quickly assessing the situation. He didn't need words. The sight of the drone's wreckage on the ground and the disturbed well said it all. "She's gone too far, Alex," he stated, his voice quiet but firm. "This isn't just about land or noise now. This is about poisoning us." Retrieving the drone was our immediate, desperate priority. We lowered a strong, magnetic grapple into the well, slowly, carefully, hoping to latch onto the metallic remains. The process was painstaking, each pull on the rope filled with anxious anticipation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we felt a solid tug. We hauled it up, a dripping, mangled mess of circuits and wires. It was a larger drone than the last, more complex. And attached to its underside, still mostly intact, was a small, sealed container. My hands trembled as I carefully detached it. The container itself was unlike the previous one. It had a pressure release valve and a tiny, almost invisible nozzle. It was designed to slowly, steadily release its contents. And those contents, a thick, viscous liquid, glowed faintly with an eerie, almost unnatural green. This wasn't fertilizer or herbicide. This was something far more sinister. We rushed the drone and the container back to Dave, our trusted veterinarian and friend. His expression darkened as he examined the eerie green substance. He immediately sent it to the same specialized lab that had analyzed the herbicide. The waiting period was even more unbearable this time. We relied on bottled water for drinking and cooking, and meticulously checked the animals, fearing the worst. The entire farm felt like it was holding its breath. The phone call from the lab finally came, and the scientist's voice, usually so composed, held a tremor of alarm. The green liquid was a potent, slow-acting biocide, designed to contaminate water sources and cause long-term, debilitating illness in anything that consumed it. It was incredibly dangerous, nearly undetectable without specialized testing, and designed to spread silently through a water system. "This wasn't just intended to make your land infertile, Alex," the scientist explained, her voice grave. "This was designed to make your farm unlivable. Whoever developed this intended to drive you out by making you and your family sick, slowly, imperceptibly. A wave of pure, cold fury washed over me, a rage unlike anything I had ever felt. Brenda had not just tried to ruin our farm, she had tried to poison us, to destroy our health, to make us suffer. This was no longer a dispute, it was a criminal act of unimaginable cruelty. Grandpa Joe listened to the news, his face turning ashen. Lily, thankfully, was playing with her dolls inside and didn't hear the horrific details. There was no turning back now. This wasn't just about our farm, it was about justice. We immediately called the authorities, not just the local sheriff, but also state environmental protection agencies. We presented all our evidence, the letters, the surveillance footage, the lab reports for both drones, and now, the retrieved biocide drone from the well. The sheer weight of the evidence, the calculated malice of Brenda's actions, was overwhelming. The investigation was swift. With the biocide drone as undeniable proof, the authorities descended on Brenda's mansion. News crews, alerted by anonymous tips, perhaps from disgruntled HOA residents finally fed up with Brenda, swarmed the Willow Creek Estates. The story of the HOA Karen and the poison drone exploded across local and national news, a shocking tale of obsession and environmental crime. Brenda, in her crisp white suit, was led away in handcuffs, her face a mask of disbelief and sputtering indignation. She screamed about trespassing and false accusations, but her words were drowned out by the flashing cameras and the growing murmur of condemnation from her own bewildered neighbors. The carefully constructed facade of the Willow Creek HOA, and Brenda's carefully cultivated image, crumbled in an instant. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Our farm, once a quiet battleground, became a symbol of resilience. People from all over the country sent messages of support, offering help, sharing stories of their own struggles against unreasonable regulations. The community rallied around us, offering donations for well cleanup and celebrating our victory. The well eventually tested clean, thanks to Patriot's timely intervention and our frantic efforts. But the wildest ending was yet to come. With Brenda gone and the HOA leadership in disarray, a new sense of community emerged in Willow Creek Estates. Many residents, finally free from Brenda's iron grip, came forward, not just to apologize for her actions, but to genuinely connect with us. They started visiting the farm, buying our produce, and even volunteering to help with chores. They brought their children to see the animals, and Lily finally had neighborhood kids to play with. The barrier Brenda had tried to build, both physical and metaphorical, finally came down. One sunny afternoon, a few months later, I stood by the ancient well, watching Lily and her new friends laugh as they chased chickens. Patriot soared gracefully overhead, a watchful, benevolent presence. The fields were green, healthier than ever, thanks to our tireless efforts and the generosity of our community. The air smelled of fresh earth and blooming flowers, a stark contrast to the chemical stench we had once feared. A neighbor from the HOA, Mrs. Henderson, walked over, a warm smile on her face. "You know, Alex," she said, looking out at the thriving farm, "Brenda always talked about property values. But she never understood the true value of this place. It's not just your farm, it's the heart of this community. And Patriot," she added, looking up at the majestic eagle, "he's a true hero." I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. The war was indeed over. And we had not just won. We had transformed our enemy's malice into a new beginning, forging a stronger, kinder community out of the ashes of conflict. Brenda's obsession had ultimately brought people together, revealing the power of kindness, empathy, and the unbreakable spirit of a family rooted deeply in their land. The farm, once threatened with obliteration, now flourished, a beacon of hope and a testament to the fact that even in the face of extreme adversity, good can always prevail.